Something like 2 minutes. In 2 minutes, we start.
Okay. That's the. Can you hear the sound?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. My name is AlNadwa, and I represent AlNadwa Free Thinking Society. Before we get started, please join me in a moment of silence to honor those killed in the ongoing genocide. Thank you. Khalil Gibran, a renowned Lebanese-American writer and philosopher, once said, there are two types of people, one rooted in the past and one striving toward the future. Which one are you? Are you secretive politician asking what your community can do for you, or an enthusiast asking what can you do for your community? If you are the first, then you are a voracious weed. If you are the second, then you are an oasis in a desert. Dear audience, we are in the presence of some remarkable and energetic community members tonight. These activists representing a newly formed organization named Arab American for Progress will discuss how to engage, organize, and empower the future of our community. We have learned about the history of the Arab American advocacy from the first wave of pioneering immigrants in the early 1900s until today. These trailblazers faced immense challenges, yet persevered, laying the groundwork for a Lebanese-Syrian movement against the Ottoman Empire. Their resilience continued through the era following the Balfour Declaration, as political protest operated under the banner of Pan-Arab identity from 1917 until 1950. And from the 70s until today, all the political activities in the community have proudly embraced the Arab American identity. Moreover, the fierce resistance in Gaza today represent a milestone in the Palestinian struggle against occupation and apartheid. We are witnessing a historical transformation that sees waves of support for the Palestinian cause from people worldwide, including the American public, especially the youth. The voice of Arab American youth has grown strong and distinct in the public discourse. They are using their platform to amplify global awareness, marking a new era of heightened civic engagement. It's fair to say that their contributions are ushering in a fresh approach to organizing and empowering our community. At AlNadwa Free Thinking Society, promoting Arab American culture is the core of our mission. Partnering with a newly formed organization fits our vision of building an open-minded community that supports critical thinking, creativity, and culture. These activities cannot be performed without the appreciated effort of volunteers and supporters alike, who spend valuable time and money furthering our cause. Our moderator for this evening has been an activist since he landed on Dix Avenue in 1977. I continue citing his positive impact in our community, but I will share some highlights for time's sake. Hassan Jabir, our moderator, has helped grow access from an organization of a small group of volunteers to one with over 120 programs at 10 locations today. This includes free national institution service communities of all backgrounds. Hassan has given 44 years of service to Access, including 14 years as president and CEO. He earned a master's degree in public administration and completed 2 training sessions at Harvard Business School and Harvard Kennedy School. He is also a board member of several organizations in Michigan and abroad and holds a special place in Dearborn and among this member of broader Arab American community. Dear audience, let's welcome Mr. Hassan Jaider and the following panelists, Mr. Abbas Alawiye, Ms. Lexi Zaidan, Ms. Petra Soufi, and Mr. Ali Abu Zaid.
Thank you, Owen. Let's see, took my notebook.
To see where all of the key secrets are.
If these are secrets, they are cheap secrets. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming this evening. And I wanna say a special thank you for our partners in this endeavor, AlNadwa, Free Society. It's a wonderful new organization aiming to enrich Arab American lives, connecting us back to our culture, to our poetry, to our history. And they've been doing an amazing job. Really needs your support. And what the event this evening is going to be in 2 parts. We're going to start with a panel discussion, roughly 45 minutes. And after that, it's a conversation between the panelists and you. Hopefully, we'll do this in an hour and a half. By the way, the joke about me is it takes me an hour and a half to watch 60 minutes. So,
Thanks to Ramzi.
so we have Lexi to tell me to hurry up. So obviously you start these events with introductions. And I'm not gonna do the introductions. I'm gonna ask the panelists to introduce themselves to you. And we're gonna ask them to do it in less than half a minute. So we'll start with Lexi.
Pressure. Hello? Is that on? No.
Hello, great. Hi, everybody. Very honored to be here in front of each of you and to share this space. My name is Lexi, born and raised in Dearborn, Michigan. I'm a Palestinian Christian American, and I like to emphasize the Christian part because of the ongoing genocide happening and constantly trying to portray it as a religious situation when we know that's not the case. But born and raised in Dearborn, I work with Teach for America Detroit. I lead their corporate development or corporate portfolio for development. I've been a lifelong educator, was a teacher, an assistant principal, and my biggest pride is being a human rights activist.
Hello everyone, my name is Ali Abu Zaid, and my day job is serving as the Chief Public Health Officer and Founding Director of Public Health here in the city of Dearborn. Dearborn, born and raised. My journey to today has been pretty non-linear. Spent about 5 years previous to this role in the federal government, working at the National Institutes of Health as a health advisor, bounced around the Health and Human Services portfolio. I've done work around refugee resettlement, have done work in Lebanon, working with the United Nations, with Palestinian and Syrian refugees, and really honored to be here today with this excellent host of panels. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Petrel Sufi. When Hassan calls, you don't ask questions, you just say yes, and you kind of tag along. I was born in Yemen, raised in Branch County, Coldwater, Michigan. That's where I grew up. If you don't know where that is, I don't expect you. It's right here. And I went to school in the west side of the state of Michigan, the Bible Belt of the Midwest, and I moved to the side of the state about 10 years ago. And no, I'm not from Dearborn, and I do not live in Dearborn. I say all of that because I think context matter, where people are from and their experiences and the people they interact with. And that's what I'm hoping to bring to the conversation. My official job, and I get paid to do outreach for the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. We are a research organization that researched the American Muslim experience for the last 20 years. I'm also very proud to be a Muslim American, so that's one thing I'm also bringing to the table. But a lot of all of these identities, and prior to ISPU, I was here in the museum for 5 years, so there's a lot of things that I do in intersections, and I'm hoping to make the conversation a little bit more complicated for us.
Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone for being here and spending this time together. My name is Abbas Alawi. I was born in Lebanon at AUBMC. I'm from Arnoun, Lebanon, and Bint Jbeil, Lebanon. I have to say that so that my Bint Jbeil side doesn't get mad. A lot of you probably in the room. I grew up here, just a few houses down from Matam Al Amir on Miller Road, and ended up going to school, becoming a public health professional, Master's in Public Health. Spent the last 7 years in Washington, D.C., first working on a USAID-funded project. And then for the last 5 years, I was sprinting up Capitol Hill, working for the coolest progressive members of Congress around, former Congressman Andy Levin, Congressman Rashida Tlaib, and most recently as Congressman Cori Bush's chief of staff. I stepped away from that work this past September, and since October, I've really been doing a lot on ceasefire in coordination and collaboration with so many of the people in our communities working to save lives and around and other communities as well. I'm a democratic strategist here in Michigan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Since you still have the microphone, the question to us, in my memory, maybe this is the second most challenging crisis we live in as Arab Americans. The first one is September 11, and now we have the Gaza situation. In between,
Your mic is off. Maybe just bring it a little bit closer, or lean a little bit closer into it.
it is awesome. Thank you. Better?
Yeah.
Okay. I was saying that this is the second most impactful crisis we go through as Arab Americans. First one is obviously September 11, and now we have the Gaza situation. And there were, I was involved in conversations after September 11 with different community groups, Arab Americans throughout the nation. And we were talking about how do we respond? How do we make an impact on policy making? How do you evaluate where we are now as Arab Americans when it comes to impact on policy making, since you served in DC, and then when it comes to electoral impact?
First of all, thank you, Hassan, for bringing us together, for your leadership. I know Hassan if I were to stand next to him, it might look a little bit small, but you all know Hassan is a giant in our community, much bigger than, your work in this community is much bigger than any of our small contributions. But I think this is a really important question to be asking. I think in a moment like this, we're living here in southeastern Michigan among Arab Americans. We're not a community that experiences foreign policy as something that is happening very far away and domestic policy as something that impacts us. So many of us are people who are survivors ourselves of US-funded wars. We know what that pain feels like in our bodies. If we didn't survive it ourselves, maybe our parents did, or maybe we love someone who has. And so when a moment like this one comes about, when Palestinian people in particular are experiencing unimaginable pain, a trauma that is incalculable, we are forced to reckon with this really difficult reality that we exist as people who are ourselves victims of the worst possible things that can be done with US taxpayer money. We have survived those bombs ourselves, many of us have. And so, where does that leave us? In a moment like this, it also forces us to reckon with the reality that political power in our country is not something that exists in one place that is very far away from us. Political power is something that people can wrestle over. And there are people in our country who are not anti-war, like you and I are, who are pro-war, who don't find it morally deplorable to profit from the making of bombs. They actually profit every time a bomb is dropped, every time a community is leveled. They make money off of this. And guess what? These people, they have a lot of lobbyists in Washington, D.C. They give a lot of money to political campaigns, and they are counting on us. They're counting on you and me to think that we are powerless. But the reality is, we are not a powerless community. We are regular, everyday people in this country who have as much power as anyone else. We have the power of our vote, we have the power of our organizing, and we have the power to build political pressure that convinces President Biden, in a moment like this, when he has allowed Netanyahu to drag our national politics to a genocidal place, we have the power to pressure him to do something different. And so one of the initiatives that I feel very lucky to be working on in collaboration with Lexi and so many incredible organizers is a push to vote uncommitted on Tuesday, February 27th, as a way of sending a message to President Biden that he can count us out for his seemingly unlimited support for Netanyahu and his unlimited and unconditional funding for the genocide. There are ways that we can build political power in this moment. Tuesday happens to be one of them, but there are others too, like what AlNadwa is doing, what Arab Americans for Progress is doing. I think post 9/11, Hassan, Access did some really incredible work in thinking through how do we make a breakthrough as a community. The mere existence of the Arab American National Museum is something that came out of those really difficult conversations post 9/11. I think we need to be doing a lot of that same thinking right now, thinking how do we build our political power immediately, but also how do we build and grow our institutions that strengthen our political power overall.
Ali, do you want to pick up on this? You've lived in DC and you know what groups have impact and what groups don't have impact. What are we missing as Arab Americans? After September 11, we had conversations, we talked about the need to build institutional capacities, to build community places, to build engagement, to build partnerships, but in particular, build an institutional capacity. Ali, from your perspective, living in DC and working on issues of capacity? What are we missing?
Echoing Bez's gratitude to you, Hassan, for putting on this event and all the work that you've done, among so many others, to get us to where we are today. I think one of the things to understand about Washington D.C. and Bez and I occupied different roles. He was in the legislative branch, and I was in the executive branch. The first thing to recognize is that Washington D.C. is full of some of the dumbest people on earth. Especially in the branch that Bez worked in. Truly, I mean, I say it facetiously, but very, very seriously. Congress, the United States Congress, is a place that has been completely taken over by corporate interests, is a place run amok with millionaires and billionaires. And when we understand and accept the reality that our United States Congress is a place that is serving the interests of capital, serving the interests of money, then we recognize why the issues that we care so deeply about as a community, including Palestine, why they aren't given the sort of public policy focus that our community demands. For me, the question is, I start with first interrogating the concept of what does it mean to be an Arab American community. I mean, obviously we're not a monolith. We have so much diversity across racial, ethnic, religious, cultural, financial backgrounds that it really begs, a question of where we start, maybe academically, but when you get to sort of a practical application of where we are and how we sort of build institutional capacity, I think it starts with recognizing where we stand on sort of a power axis. How much power do we actually have? Who is that power in our community? Are we recycling and regurgitating the same cycles of ineffective leadership from generations past? Or are we sort of interrupting those cycles? Dearborn is an interesting community. And I think I'm someone who leans on Black scholarship quite a bit. And especially when I think about, scholars like W.B. Du Bois, who talk about the most important thing that we can do is talk about this, as insofar as the truth is ascertainable. And so, here we are about a year and a half removed of the 2022 midterms, where the Arab American community, especially in Dearborn, was basically split at its seams because of issues related to progressive politics, because of issues related to the LGBTQ community, because of issues related to books and book banning and book freedom. And here we are a year later, all of us seemingly on the same page. And I think the signal that we're sending is that when we organize together and don't allow disagreements and dissent to tear apart a community, especially institutionally, that we can do something with this. I think the campaign that Lexi and Abbas and all the other brilliant organizers of Uncommitted are showing us is that they're modeling a way for Arab American institutional organizing, that we can all put our differences aside and we can create that power that can then go work within the corridors of idiocy in Washington, D.C. and maybe get something done.
Okay. Hey, Lexi, I know you're young, but you've been on the forefront of responding to the crisis in Gaza. You and many from your generation, we thank you. How do you evaluate how the community responded to the crisis in Gaza?
Yeah, I want to echo what Abbas and Ali said about thanking you for bringing us into this space. I think mobilizing like this and being in community to have these conversations is really important. I think I was smiling at a lot of the stuff that Ali was saying, because one of the things I think that plagues our community is the willingness to trust each other and to build upon each other and to understand each other's background. I talk a lot about my unique experience of growing up in Dearborn as a Christian Arab and how my closest friends and the way I talk about the Muslim community, some of my best friends are. I have that privilege because I grew up here and I understood what it meant to be raised in Dearborn alongside my Muslim brothers and sisters, and what a beautiful community it was. My father also owned businesses in Detroit, and I had a lot of exposure and experience with being intertwined with the Black community as well. And I think it's my very diverse experience that has created opportunity for me to connect very deeply with people at the onset of what happened in October, to be able to mobilize our community in ways that I just described, of trying to put our differences aside and really focusing on what we care about deeply, which is caring for each other and uplifting each other and creating a society in which we all want to live in, which is where everybody gets to experience freedom. And so I think, I'm very proud of the way that we have responded, particularly because of people like Abbas. I think Abbas doesn't give himself enough credit, and he doesn't realize the impact he has on people like myself because of his humbleness, but also his experience and how he approaches these situations in a way that really gets us to understand that there's a bigger picture here. There's a bigger picture for all of us, and we will never get there if we don't mobilize together. And I think it took a little bit of time at first. We've been grieving, we've gone through trauma, and so having to deal with all these different things, to get to where we are now was a little bit rocky, but we didn't get here alone. And even though Listen to Michigan Uncommitted, I think that I explained activism happens in waves. Your first wave is you alert people. It's like you're sounding the alarm. Your second wave is that you then start to inform people. You're trying to educate as much as you can through boycotts, through education, through hosting events. And your third wave is you activate your collective power, whether it's politically or trying to build different organizations. And I've seen our community do that. And I think that we did it in response to all the work that came before us, the work that you've done, Hassan, and every other leader. There's so many things that have happened before us. And, I've heard somebody say to me that you build upon the legend that came before you. You don't start something new, and you don't dismiss. It's not always gonna work, but you can't forget your history, and you have to understand history in order to advance towards a better future. And I think that we've done a really good job of being able to do that. And I think one of the things I say is you have to pass the baton over to the right generation. And I think there is a generation of us who our parents have sacrificed so much immigrating here and really trying to acclimate into this culture and really allowing for us to succeed and now being able to carry those reins and advancing our community forward.
Thank you, Maxine. Now, Petra and I go some years back, and in all honesty, she is the smartest people that I've ever taught, and really an amazing asset for us in the community. Petra, what she didn't say to you, that she's left the museum. She was an educator here at the museum, the best we had. And she went to a research and Poland and advocacy organization. So, Petra, since you've been doing research for some time now, what's some of the research that it's most interesting to share regarding Arab Muslims? And after that, I want to follow to everyone with a question about what is our Arab American policy agenda should look like. So get ready for the second. Let's go.
Thank you, Hassan, and echoing what everyone else said here. I have the pleasure of now working virtually. I'm a very extroverted person, as Hassan remembers, but I'm noticing that I'm getting tired, like very, very tired, being in these communications and these conversations. And this is one of the few times that I've actually made an exception, because I believe that we do need a space to have honest conversations about ourselves and look internally to assess what is the moment we're in and what does it mean for us. So thank you for getting me out of the house. To answer your question, and actually before I get into the specific research, I want to get back to the political, where are we politically? I really want to kind of talk about that. And it is connected to the research. And the reason I want to touch on it is in my lived experience and also the work that I do, which is with a lot of policymakers in DC, as you know, they know so much about us. with our interfaith allies, and in spaces where it doesn't look like Europe. You know, we're so privileged here. We really are so privileged. And so I'm in the spaces where people have never met a Muslim, have never met an Arab in their life. You know, and all they know about us is what they see from the media, which, by the way, it portrays us worse than cancer and cocaine. Let me just repeat that. For over 20 years, media studies show the Arabs, Muslims, and Islam have been portrayed worse than cancer and cocaine. And less than 50% of Americans have met an Arab or a Muslim in their life. And I know I'm using these two words, I know they're not the same, but for the sake of this conversation, we're gonna use them interchangeably, because the reality outside of our really beautiful communities here in Dearwood and some of the communities where we are privileged to have people who look like us around us, they really don't know the difference. As a matter of fact, they don't know the difference between being a Muslim and being a Sikh from the Sikh community. The first person that was killed after 9/11 was not a Muslim. It was someone from the Sikh community. He was not Arab, he was not Muslim, he was nothing. He was from the Sikh community and people assumed he was Muslim, so he was killed. Why am I bringing this? Because in all the research that we do, there are institutional challenges that we face. And we put them under Islamophobia in our research, but I'm gonna tell you as an Arab American, you could put whatever label you wanna put on them, they apply to almost every single person in this room. Banking challenges, airport, law enforcement, in the healthcare setting, in the public schools where your kids are studying, 50% or at least 50% of parents say their child was bullied because of their faith, and 1/3 of these cases are the hands of an adult in the school setting. Not by other kids, an adult was bullying their child, okay? So the challenges that we face out there, they don't care what your private life looks like. And I bring that up because it is really important for us to assess our political standing right now. We have fire in the house. You know, we have a young generation. I'm not gonna put myself in that group because I'm too tired. They have so much energy and they're doing so much amazing work out there. So we need to open the doors for them. But we also have, I'm gonna use this word carefully, but I wanna use it. I think we have lack of political maturity. I don't think we're politically mature as a community. What I mean by that is we let our emotions drive us. We have strategists and people who know, but often we don't give them the right space to lead us in these conversations. So we end up sabotaging each other and each other's work. And yes, there's a campaign that's happening this week, but I'm gonna tell you as someone who's not directly involved because I'm letting other people do it, I am seeing the sabotage that's happening behind the closed doors. So we wanna make a political statement to DC and say, you know, we have a voice, we have power, but I'm seeing people within our community sabotaging each other. And so, which does not happen in other impacted communities. That's the difference. The difference is other communities that are our size have similar resources. They don't do that to each other. They disagree in private. They critique each other in private. They let each other specialize in whatever work they're doing, even if they're on the opposite end of the spectrum of their beliefs. But you never ever hear them call each other out. You never hear them call each other organization out. So I'm bringing that up to say, kind of wrap it up. The challenges we face, they don't care what your faith is. They don't care if you're from Lebanon or from Yemen or from where. We're all the same. We have so much potential to grow politically, but we need to stop sabotaging each other, and we need to let the people with the right expertise lead that charge. And we need to also allow all different kind of political engagement to exist at the same time. That's the last one I'm gonna say. All political engagement need to happen at the same time. We're not gonna be successful with just one approach. We're too small to make that kind of difference.
Hey, Petra, before we give it to someone else, I want you to share some of the, speaking of sabotage, I want you to share some of the research finding regarding position of ceasefire, and especially the information you shared with me.
Yeah, so one of the latest reports we released literally last week, if you haven't seen it, please reach out to me, sign up for our newsletter so you can receive that kind of information. But we released a poll on religious communities' views on ceasefire. So as a research organization, we can't jump the first day of an event to be Martian. We wait months until poll is out. And so we poll American Muslims, which nobody else bothers to poll them. We poll American Jews because we want to do the comparison due to the similarities in size and experience and all of that. We also poll American Christians, so Catholics, Protestants, and white evangelicals, as well as the general publics and non-affiliates. And we do that to make sure that American Muslims are put in the right conversation with other faith communities. They're not always the other. So we asked them, do you support a permanent ceasefire? And that question went out to everybody. And I just want to read you the numbers and kind of pause because, first of all, the majority in all these faith groups support a permanent ceasefire. There was no community that did not support it, more than 50%. Okay? What was really surprising to me and to a lot of people in our team was even white evangelicals, 58% of white evangelicals support a permanent ceasefire. For some of you who are familiar, that's really strange because in everything else that we do, usually there is a kind of a difference between Muslims and white evangelicals when it comes to, foreign policy, when it comes to, who wants their law to be the law of the land, all of these things. Even the support of Islamophobia is higher among white evangelicals than it is among other faith communities. But even that group supports a permanent ceasefire. Okay, so that's surprising. We also found that there is a significant, or there is a small percentage of Muslims who do not support ceasefire. I know. So you can't always assume that people who look like you are on the same page as you are. And you also can't say, I'm never gonna work with a community that doesn't match what I use. In this specific issue that we're all trying to get something done, we have more allies than people think we do or we don't. So what is our strategy and how do we reach out to them? And that's just one data point in a whole poll. I'm happy to talk about people afterward and share others.
Thank you, Beto. So Ali, pick up from there. What should Arab American policy agenda should look like? What should it include?
I'm just struck by what Petra just said about not all American Muslims support a ceasefire.
Actually, she didn't tell you it's 20%.
That's enormous. That's not shocking to me, actually. Because of some of the Muslims that I'm a Muslim identifying person. Because of some of the Muslims that I've been around Washington, D.C., what was this, 2019, when we had that little rift? I used to say a sort of crass joke when I was in D.C. that there are some Muslims who would justify drone strikes in Yemen if it meant a $20,000 pay increase in the federal government. And it's really not a joke. Those people exist. I have interacted with them. I've been in circles with them. Just to show you how insidious the powerful interests around warmongering and the weapons manufacturers are. I mean, if you're an American Muslim and you work at a Raytheon or you work at a Northrop Grumman, weapons manufacturers, you should really be asking yourself fundamental questions. And so this question about community is something that I interrogate often. I felt more in community at times with Jewish members of the community. I felt more in community with Black members of the community than I have with Arab Americans, than Muslim Americans, because community for me is defined as who views liberation as something that cannot happen in isolation, who views healing as something that cannot happen in isolation. Put better, who views liberation as something that has to be a collective, concerted effort. And the reality is the Arab American policy agenda should be a domestic social policy agenda that leads with making sure that we treat poverty as the pathogen that it is, that we make sure that people have livable wages, that we increase the minimum wage, that we believe that universal health care is something that's promised to all people. Because as Abbas alluded to at the beginning, foreign policy and domestic social policy, those are misnomers, those aren't real distinctions. Foreign policy is directly connected to domestic social policy. And so the Arab American policy agenda needs to be one that recognizes that in order for us to be free, in order for Palestine to be free, we need to support Black people in America to be free. We need to make sure that we're rooting out anti-Semitism and anti-LGBTQ hate in our communities too. We need to make sure basically that we are tying our liberation to every other liberation effort on earth. That's the Arab American policy agenda.
Lexi, you want to add to this?
I mean, I want to echo what Ali said. I had a conversation with somebody the other day that we have to get out of this notion that we only want to care about issues related to Arab Americans. We can't advance our community if we're not going to show up for other communities as well, because cycles and systems of oppression typically impact communities of color. And to think that Arabs are not part of that system, we're wrong to think that. And to think that we don't need to be alongside other oppressed communities, we're also wrong in thinking that as well. And I've just been really pushing this conversation to see the allyship that I've been around in activism and on the streets. You know, it is our Jewish American brothers and sisters that are on the front lines doing what it is that needs to be done. And I'm not saying that Arab American voice needs to be solidified or starred by another person, but what I am saying is that what I want to reemphasize what Ali said, it's about collective power. I always say organized people always beats organized money. And when you look at who has so much control, AIPAC and other lobbying groups, if we continue to work siloed, we will never win. But if we work in a collective effort together, then we're moving in the right step and in the right direction. And again, we're creating an environment and a society, I'll continue to repeat this, where people are truly and genuinely free. I can't sit here and say that I want Palestinians to be free, and I'm going to reemphasize again what Ali said, but then hide behind the bars or behind the curtains when it comes to advocating for Black rights and our LGBTQ rights. I have to be willing to be on the front line for any person whose identity is threatened by corporate interests and special interests, which is currently wreaking havoc on our democracy here in America. And so I think, again, to emphasize the policy agenda is echoing what Ali said, but I think the other piece that's missing too is understanding we have to define what our collective North Star is. What is it that no matter what space I'm in, because my activism looks different than Ali's, looks different than Petra's, looks different than Abbas's, and that's okay, it's not gonna always look the same. But when I'm in a space and Ali's in a space and Petra and Abbas, we know that no matter what, we're working towards a collective North Star and we're operating under the same values that should be guiding us. And it's values where we're like valuing human life no matter where you come from. It's values that show that I'm willing to put myself on the line. It's values that show that I'm no longer, moving in a direction towards special interests and what advances my own career, my own political agenda. I've said this before and I'll say it many times, and I think it would apply to anybody here. I would lose my job and friends and my entire career if it saved any life in Gaza. I would do it any day of the week. I would do it any moment that I had. And I think that we have to start operating that. We got to get out of this individualistic mindset. I think that's an American mindset, is individualism. And when we think about the Arab American policy agenda, we really need to start thinking about it from a collectivist mindset. It's how we're raised, it's what our culture is about. And I think that we need to be rooted in that.
That's right.
I mean, I promised to complicate things, so that's why I'm here. I think another part of, in order for us to have a collective or an agreed upon policy agenda publicly facing, we internally need to acknowledge the differences that we have. And we also need to recognize that not all issues are going to be viewed similarly across our communities. What I mean by that, and also there's the third component of that is back to the maturity and the understanding, recognizing where certain issues need to be debated at the national policy level, where some need to be at the local level, and some need to be at the school board or with your child's teacher.
What's the connection?
And what's the connection between all of that? I think we need to recognize that, and if we don't recognize it or we dismiss concerns that exist within a changing and growing community, then we are shrinking our collective power, we are further dividing the community, and we're literally driving people to camps that we do not want them to be.
Thank you. Abbas, last word on this. I'm really interested in having conversations tonight and other nights regarding how we put together an Arab American initiative on a local and on a national level.
So much of what has been shared by my fellow panelists is so much more like on the money and insightful than anything that I could share. I was thinking about that word collective liberation when that you mentioned, Ali, when you asked this question, Hassan. And I think that as we mature as a community, it's really important to recognize that when we're setting an agenda, that it's based on the principles that all of us can come together around. I also think it's okay for us in our political journey now to lean into declaring some things unapologetically in our agenda. Like, gone are the days when we do not stand up and say we are with a free Palestine until Palestine is free. Gone are those days. I remember those days. You remember them too, when we would be afraid to speak out. Okay? Those days have to be behind us because they've dragged our politics. The pro-war interests in our country have dragged our politics to a genocidal place that requires us to have a responsibility to those 13,000 plus kids in Gaza whose lives have been taken by our own taxpayer-funded bombs. That is a commitment that you and I and all of us need to make to one another, that Palestinian liberation is a non-negotiable, forevermore. In addition to that, I think our collective liberation requires, and if it's true that, you know, and I believe this deeply in my bones, that we won't be liberated until every community whose rights have been denied or stripped away or stepped upon, that we are in solidarity with those communities and that we move forward. But we as a community, we're not unique in this experience, but we do have the expertise of our lived experience as a community that knows what it's like to survive US-funded wars. And so I think as a community, we ought to be explicitly anti-war. Unfortunately, the Republican Party is not explicitly anti-war. And I'm sad to admit, as a Democratic strategist, that the Democratic Party is not explicitly anti-war. We need an anti-war movement in this country, and Arab Americans ought to be at the forefront of that movement, linking arms with every other community that is working towards that end now. I think one final point is really important because, you know, a lot of what I was experiencing in the moments that you mentioned, Ali, as, you know, I guess just over a year ago, there was all this talk of book bans and things like that here in our community. And I think it's really important for us as a community to do a couple of things. One, not to confuse political tricks with building political power. If anybody in this community thinks that a drive to scare the gay kids in our community, and you know them, you know they exist. If anybody thinks that the drive to scare those kids out of feeling safe in their own room, if you think that's how we build political power, I want to talk to you after this. I disagree with you. I don't think we achieve anything by falling for the far right's agenda to come into our community, infiltrate, and have people be scared of written material that exists in libraries. That is not a way for us to build political power. I also think that it is not productive, nor is it useful for us, if we happen to be pro-LGBT, to look at the people who are scared by all of the misinformation that is going around in our community and wag our finger and say, how dare you, you're backwards. No, there is real fear in our community about what our children are being exposed to, about the world that they're living in, as our children right now are live streaming a genocide on their phones, trying to make sense of how in the world our country can support this. And so the way that we build our power is not by saying, oh, you know who really makes a difference is the people who sit down with the Biden administration officials. Those are the people really making the difference. Or no, you know who really makes the difference is the people outside protesting the Biden administration officials. The people inside are traitors. One of the things that I'm especially proud of, there was a meeting recently here in Dearborn. And I'm a part of the Listen to Michigan campaign. And I was inside that meeting and said in that meeting something that I will say publicly to anyone, looked those people in the eyes and told them that if you have not advised President Biden to call for an immediate ceasefire, then don't show your face in this community, because you are demonstrating that you wouldn't care if we were among the dead. And I'm proud that outside of that same meeting, Lexi and others who are part of this campaign and just organizers were protesting that meeting. Petra's point is a really important one. We build political power when we come to a common agenda and we're reading from that script outside of the protest and inside in the meeting and on the phones when we're calling our representatives. We have to be invested in each other's liberation across the board. That requires us not tearing each other down and not suggesting that one political engagement is more worthy than another.
Okay, best stay
Can
on.
I add something very
Sure,
quick?
sure.
I just want to add, I think a key thing that was really important, because I was very anti-meeting, by the way, but it was like my shared relationship and my trust with Abbas. Actually, Abbas helped me come over a bridge that I didn't understand because of my own emotions and the impact that I had being a Palestinian and feeling like my community was betraying me by being in that meeting. And I think the key thing was shared understanding between Abbas and I, and shared trust. And I think that's really important when you're trying to build agendas and build movements. You have to also build shared trust, so that way no matter what, I will give my life to Abbas and I know I can trust it. And I think that was a key element and a key piece that I really want to emphasize, because I can be outside protesting still and saying I'm not for the Biden or his administration while Abbas is in there saying it, and I'm trusting Abbas that's in there saying it. And then also Abbas is not afraid to bring me along on the journey to understand why both perspectives are really important.
By the way, this young lady organized a protest at Gary Peters' house. And the day after, I told her, I have a meeting with Gary Peters, I want you to come with me. And Gary Peters' staff was saying to me, is she gonna come and fight us? I said, yeah. But that's not where the story is that the night before I had a conversation with her before the meeting, and was one of the most intelligent young people conversation I've had. And I told her, what we doing? She told me how she feels. And we both agreed that we both are doing what needs to be done. So, Abbas, keep on the microphone, and we're not gonna take too much time on this, but it's in the news, it's in the community. The Listen to Michigan campaign, vote and committee. What's the purpose? What we do? What's the strategy here? I know you and Lexi are working on this. I want you to give me the big strategy behind this. Let's not take too much time on this. I want to hear from Lexi on the ground, what's going on. And then I want to ask you a question after that. Go ahead.
Fantastic, thank you so much, Hassan. So basically, here in our community, here in Michigan, all across the country, since October, people have been doing the work to achieve a ceasefire that saves lives, that saves that kid in Gaza's life who ought to be saved. This is a movement that is not new, okay? It's part and parcel of the larger movement that is decades old for Palestinian liberation. We're calling for a ceasefire now. We're also calling for an end to occupation and apartheid as we always will. With that, since October, we as a community have been doing everything we can. We've been calling, we've been texting, we've been protesting. Some people are protesting and shutting down highways, and still Biden has not changed his policy one bit. Still, Biden's policy seems to be the exact script of whatever genocidal campaign that Netanyahu is continuing to pursue. And so Biden hasn't heard us so far. He needs to hear us. And he needs to hear us because a ceasefire is necessary and urgent for saving lives, but also we know, as people here in Michigan who are experiencing that deep sense of pain, a state where he got to be president because we put him there, because Arab American and Muslim American people here in this state, along with others, organized and helped deliver him the presidency in a very key state. What's happening right now is our movement for a ceasefire. We're always looking for how to generate the most attention as possible for a ceasefire so that that can happen, so that we can move on to thinking about how we can support our Palestinian community in processing the deep trauma that is ongoing and where we go from here. And so right now, our campaign has a strategy that is twofold. One is there's a box on your ballot, okay, that says uncommitted, on the Democratic presidential ballot. It says uncommitted. Not every state has that uncommitted box. And so what we came together as organizers and said is, okay, there's a box, and we know people in our community are hurting. So let's give people in our community a way to express that hurt in a way that's not just a social media post, which is important, not just writing to your senator, which is important, but a vote that Joe Biden needs. And so we're telling people to vote uncommitted, okay? And we are making the public case. The first prong of our strategy is to make the public case to claim that box, to say everybody who wants a ceasefire is voting uncommitted, okay? And we have been pretty successful at that. Maybe you've been watching CNN, maybe you've seen Lexi on CNN and MSNBC and elsewhere. Maybe you read the New York Times and you're hearing about this. Maybe you see that the Metro Times here locally endorsed the campaign, okay? We have claimed that box. It's ours. As a community, it's up to us. It's our box. And so now the second prong of the approach is, can we get our community to vote uncommitted? Can we flex our political muscle, grow our political power? That is up to us. That's a question for you. If you've voted already, great. If you haven't voted already, between now and Sunday, you can show up to the city clerk's office and pull a Democratic presidential primary ballot and circle uncommitted. And some people will say, well, why not pull the Republican ballot to really show them that I don't care? No. The president right now is a Democrat. His name is Joe Biden. We're sending him a message. The purpose of the campaign is not to sink anybody's political career or another. It's for us to be accountable to that kid in Gaza. And that kid in Gaza needs us to push for a ceasefire. The best way to do that right now, that's generating all of the headlines in a moment where all eyes are on Michigan, to see whether or not the Arab American community and others are going to register their disapproval with President Biden. The best way to do that is to vote uncommitted. Between now and Sunday, you can show up to your city clerk's office and do it. And on Tuesday, you can show up to the poll and vote uncommitted. And so if you believe that we need an anti-war politics, if you believe that President Biden needs to publicly call for a ceasefire and stop funding the genocide, then I urge you to do it yourself. Go vote uncommitted. Circle that box, vote uncommitted, and don't just stop there. Please, I'm urging you. Tell at least 3 people to do the same thing. Take them with you to the poll. It's really, really important. It's the strongest way that we send a message. I've heard from people inside the White House that this White House is scared of the political power that we will that we will demonstrate on Tuesday. It's up to us to make that, to build our power.
There's one more, I mean, and we talked about this. This is a call for our community to actually go out and vote uncommitted. If we not shown a significant percentage, and by significant, we all know that this is a campaign that was put together in the last 2 weeks only. If we can get between 7 and 10% of the vote uncommitted, that's a very powerful message. But what's also very, very critical, that our community don't sit this election out. That's the worst outcome that we can face. It's all about the numbers. If we can show that we have a significant number of a margin shifted, that's a very, very powerful message. And it's an empowerment for our community. Let's see, I know you're working on the ground. Anything you want to share that community should know about? I know that you're going to be doing some calling. I know that we have a digital ad going on. I know that we have actually mailing that's going to go to, what, 190,000 households?
75,000.
75,000. By the way, we also pointed out that there is in Wayne County alone, and that's Arab and maybe names similar to Arab names and Muslims. There are 190,000 registered voters. That's a significant number. So let's see, anything you want to add to what to expect?
Yeah, I think I'll just add from what Abbas is saying, it's actually a movement that's growing, and I want to share how it's growing so that way people understand how important this truly is. Sometimes you hear about an idea, but when you see it in action, it creates a different sense of urgency. And what I will say is, this happened, we launched it less than a month ago, and we've already had people across all of Michigan that are engaging, even nationally. We had Our Revolution, which is an organization that endorsed it nationally, that is actually having their own folks that are calling and texting and sending information to people in Michigan about voting uncommitted. We've had phone banks across the city of Dearborn and Detroit, where we've had a number of diverse folks, Jewish, Arab, Black, white, that came in and is making calls to voters, asking them to vote uncommitted. And I think just the point that I want to emphasize that Hassan just shared is the power of voting and how we cannot sit this election out. There was an article that somebody shared the other day. I don't think I was born at this time. I don't remember what mayor it was under, but they had, at the time they had said like we had an Arab problem when we were coming into Dearborn.
I do.
And thank you, yes. And part of our response to that is we actually started to mobilize each other, and we started to grow our numbers, our number of registered voters. And to this day, it's something that we should be proud of. We have elected our first Arab Muslim mayor of Dearborn. We have Abraham Ayash, who's the majority floor leader. You have Alabas Faryat. You have Wayne County Commissioner Sam Beydoun. We have so many of our leaders in this community that are Arab, that are in these positions. They didn't get there miraculously. Nobody put them there. We mobilized and we put them there. And so there's an opportunity for us to do the same thing. And if you like to participate, I would urge you all to go to listentomichigan.com and find ways to get involved. Any additional phone bankers that if you want to phone bank with us, if you want to text bank with us, if you want to potentially door knock with us, stand at the polls on the day of elections and pass out literature that tells folks to vote uncommitted. It's an amazing strategy that was built by really, really educated and intelligible strategists to show that we have collective power here, and that right now we are not aligned with Biden or his administration and or the Democratic Party. and that they need to listen to what our community has to say.
All right, so because we had extremely smart panelists, we went over time on this part of the conversation. Now we want to shift to you. Any questions from anyone? Hey, Amanda, where is Amanda? Come in.
Hassan, I do have a question.
Yeah.
I have a mic.
You can, but Amanda, come up.
I want to give it to the people.
Amanda. I want you to take the microphone to the people who want to speak. And Ramzi is first.
Thank you. And I think the campaign is great and the message is great, but why not, instead of uncommitted, write in Rashida Tlaib's name to protest the way they treated her in Congress? Send a double message.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that question. Thank you so much. It's a really good question. Part of what we know, and I spoke with the Michigan Secretary of State about this directly, is that any write-in vote, regardless of what you write in will not be registered anywhere. There will not be somewhere where it says Rashida Tlaib got 100 votes or 500 votes. That does not happen, because in order for a write-in vote to be registered, a candidate would have to register as a write-in candidate by a certain date, and no candidate has registered for that here in Michigan. Additionally, I'm glad you mentioned Congresswoman Tlaib. She has endorsed this campaign. She wants everybody here to vote uncommitted. And so I just wanted to mention that too.
And Ahmad has a question. Here.
Is it on, Amor?
Yeah.
I understand what I hear so far. By the way, I flunk politics 101. But, you know, I'm not concerned for now to show our basically one voice, and we are basically not happy with what Biden did. This is excellent strategy. But what I'm afraid of is like, we damn if we do, and we damn if we don't. We damn if we support the Democrat, and we damn if we don't support him. After November, God forbid, Trump shows again, they're gonna say, here you guys, they're gonna hate us more than what they hate us now. And they're gonna look at us that we made Biden, we made Trump win that election. So how are we gonna start strategizing after this Sunday? We're gonna start thinking about what should be our strategy. And we have, you probably guys touched on it, but we're gonna mobilize from now. We don't wanna wait until October. We wanna start now saying, this is our strategy, period. And if it has to be third, I wish there's a third party that I can vote for that has some hope. So my vote wouldn't be wasted. So my point is, should we start mobilizing now about what should be the strategy after that? And that's what my concern is.
Okay. Sure, please.
So this is in my personal capacity. This is my personal opinion, very strong personal opinion on this. Two things. One, both parties already know how strong we are as a group of voters. The reason they know that, and the reason they see the numbers, I'm sure others can speak to that more than I can, but the strategy to come and divide the community did not happen in a vacuum. If you think that just happened out of nowhere, that's not true. Political scientists and people who have been studying our community and studying what's going on will tell you this was purposely done to divide the community's vote, because the community's vote is growing because both political parties recognize how important our group of voters is to the two.
In fact, there are people being paid, activists, to come in and work on dividing the community.
So that's the first part, and I'm there are literally people who are, this is what they do for a living, they study this, and they will tell you this was done intentionally, and it's not just done to the Arab American vote, it's done to other minority votes because this is a strategy to divide the vote. So one thing that we need to do is get behind this specific strategy for now, vote and committed, or get out and vote, just get out and vote, okay? And then the second thing, when people try to scare you that, if we don't do this or we don't do that, Trump's gonna get into office, he might. That's a reality we have to deal with. And we have to recognize that there is no way where his presidency, and I'm saying this in my personal capacity, there is no way that his presidency will ever be good for us.
Trump.
I don't care who else is in office. So we could put our disagreements aside. There have been enough evidence to show how bad this will be, not just for our communities, but for the country. And so there are enough groups that we could build allyship and coalitions with to get to the next step after the primaries.
Okay.
I have a question.
Hi, my name is Elise. Thank you very, very much for this forum. I really appreciate it. I didn't know that anyone had been protesting outside of Gary Peters' house, so that's great. I've been telling my husband nonstop that it's driving me crazy that Haley Stevens is our representative and nobody's protesting outside of her place. I think our representatives are way too comfortable. In other states, like people are calling Blinken Bloody Blinken and throwing blood at his cars, and I think that kind of activism is putting a lot of pressure on our representatives. And so essentially I'm just asking if there's any kind of network I can leverage to help me protest outside of Haley Stevens' office, I would really appreciate that.
You just find me after.
Okay. Your dad next, or from here.
Assalamualaikum everyone. So I have a question for all the panelists because I'm very intrigued by the research done on the 20% of Arab Muslims that don't want a permanent ceasefire. Was the question specifically around permanent? Can I get that clarity first?
Yeah, the question asked if you support a permanent ceasefire.
Okay, then this goes into my follow-up question. So everyone on the panel is very aware of wanting liberation for Palestine, right? And these words have meanings. A permanent ceasefire means a pause on war, right? North and South Korea have had a permanent ceasefire since their war, and there are plenty of Koreans who do not like the idea of a permanent ceasefire because it did not move on to part two, either full occupation or treaties. So if we're considering Palestine and Israel is occupying actively a lot of Palestine. Are we really sure we want to get to a point of a permanent ceasefire where Palestine is still being very occupied and Israel just gets to pause the genocidal stuff that we are documenting now, but it doesn't stop the harm that's started 75 plus years ago? I guess I want to ask where your minds are around the concept of a permanent ceasefire, because if I had taken that survey, I would have been part of the 20% who said no. Ceasefire, yes, in real time, there are people dying 100%. Permanent ceasefires do not do anything for the people that are being occupied. Again, referencing Korea. The Koreans on both the North and South have their own permanent ceasefire. So I kind of want to pick your brains if you'll have capacity tonight for that.
I mean, that's a complicated question, and part of research is you need more research on certain data points, all we know now is a data point that tells us this is the percentage of people that did not support a ceasefire. It does not say why or who they are. And I think one thing that we could do is speculate, maybe it is people who say, I'm not comfortable with a permanent ceasefire, I want something more. But it could also be the people that says, you know what, no, this is not what we want. And I will tell you from our own personal experiences, it's probably a mix of all of that, because we've all talked to Muslims who will say the craziest thing you've ever heard in your life. But others might be expecting more. So I don't know. The short answer is we don't know. We can't tell from the current research that's being done. But it's also something that for us to just keep an eye on. It's similar to when we see that internalized Islamophobia is actually growing among American Muslims. It's decreasing in other groups, but it's growing among American Muslims. So there are a lot of different things that we can gather and say maybe it's that kind of picture. And that would require time and resources to get into that. And I think obviously there will be more research on this down the line. But for the moment we're in, that's just a reality we have to acknowledge and realize who's in arcane and who's not in arcane, whether they're Muslim or not, or and how to handle conversations when they come up.
I think we worded to be a little bit more clear. I guess.
Just, can you use the microphone?
Oh, it's fine, I'll be loud enough. For the panelists tonight, is a ceasefire tied to true liberation? I think I can put it that way, it's simple. Like, is a permanent ceasefire a solution to true liberation?
You know, I think something Alexi said earlier, just the phrase shared understanding is hugely important. You know, someone can go call themselves a capitalist or a socialist or a communist, and the only thing that matters is do we have shared understanding around these terms. In the current context, since October 7, it's very clear that we have shared understanding around permanent ceasefire. That means no longer are we going to have a 5-day ceasefire like the one that we had in December. No longer are we going to have a 2-week ceasefire. Permanent means permanent right now. You know, none of us walk around chasing streetlights and treating them like the moon. We all see American foreign policy for what it is. We all recognize that it's a bipartisan affair. We all recognize that, you know, the occupation has continued. We all recognize that ethno-nationalism in the West Bank has continued. We all recognize that settler colonialist expansion settlements are continuing in the West Bank. I think and I know I can speak for all the panelists here, is that any day that gets us closer to a cessation in hostilities means that families are no longer torn apart by children and men and women who are dying. There was some studies done during in a sort of previous escalation showing that for every Palestinian killed, 13 members of the family was mourned that person. I think that's a huge underestimate, but I think anything that gets us closer to this secondary chronic trauma that's being faced by the Palestinians in Gaza is one way towards, you know, liberation. But I appreciate your ethos. I appreciate what you're getting at.
Thank you. Sure.
Thank you very much. In 1984, before you were even born, I'm very happy to see that the generation after 1984 is on the panel. Jesse Jackson was one of the people who promoted and tried to put the Palestinian question on the platform of the Democratic Party. Since then, many of us who were support of that cause and support of Jesse and his effort, and we were trying to put the Palestinian question on the platform of the Democratic Party, just for human rights support to be on the platform, and we have not been successful. Even for the last election or before, even when after the progressives came to at least there has been a group of that they claim they're progressive, and we still could not put the Palestinian issue for human rights on the platform of the Democratic Party, let alone the fascist Republican Party. How can we make the Palestinian issues and the platform of at least the political parties, and I say, even though we disagree with Biden wholeheartedly, how can we push to put the Palestinian issue on the Democratic Party, okay, or perhaps on the Republican Party platform?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dr. Yusuf. I think if we look at what we have now, we have a president who is not with us on this. And Democratic Party leadership across the board who are not with us on this, whether you're talking about in the House of Representatives, in the US Senate, and elsewhere in the Democratic National Committee itself. And so I think there is a lot of groundwork that we need to lay on that long path of ensuring that Palestinian liberation ends up on the platform. I do think that that work starts here in Michigan. I do think that there is a world not too distant from now where we build enough power in this state, where we show up for our Black American siblings and our Jewish American siblings here in Southeastern Michigan, and for workers and for people who are living in poverty, where we really build a movement here in Michigan that also includes Palestinian liberation. I want to live in a world where we say to the rest of this country, Michigan is pro-Palestinian. I think we could do that. I actually don't think that's a far-fetched political fantasy. I think we can wield power here in this state. I think, I don't just mean to plug my thing, but I think that starts with, like, I want to get enough votes on Tuesday, this upcoming Tuesday, so that by the end of it, we can go up and say, Michigan is on its way to becoming the country's first explicitly pro-Palestinian state. That Palestine is an issue that Michigan voters care about. I think that work starts here on the longer path to some of the national party platforms that you're talking about.
Can I just add, I think a key piece that's missing too, at that time, you have to think about Palestinians are not seen as humans. And so to ask a party to recognize their rights when they're constantly being dehumanized on so many different platforms, people don't feel a sense of urgency. And what I want to build off of what Abbas is saying is we're actually at a key moment in history right now where we have done the activist work for people to understand the trauma and the grief and the experiences of what Palestinians are experiencing. And they're no longer seeing them as second class. They're seeing them as their own. And I think that's a key piece of the moment that we're dealing with right now, where you can take strategies and now combine it with elements that are really important to human rights activism, which is seeing people for what they are, which is people, and being able to build on this key moment in a collective way, where Listen to Michigan is really important, again, not because Abbas and I are sitting on this campaign, but it shows a collective strategy that we can all get behind, where it's not just a short-sighted decision, but it's actually a long-term strategy too, where let's say we do hypothetically get Trump for 4 years and we have to sit through that pain. I can guarantee you in 2024, Democrats are gonna, or in 2028, Democrats are gonna come knocking on our door because they know that in 2024, we mobilized and we did what we needed to do for them to hear us. And so I think that we're dealing with a much different situation than back during that time where they denied that platform, and we're really entering into a space where they're gonna give us the platform and they're gonna listen to us.
So, yeah. I'm feeling that we abusing your patience, and we went over time. So we're gonna take 2 more questions, and that's it. Okay? And thank you so much. I know you wanted to ask a question. Amanda, what are you doing?
She went to sleep.
No, somebody there.
I do it.
You do.
Well, my question is about the uncommitted strategy. What if we don't have enough votes? Isn't that gonna backfire? That's one thing. The second thing, are you coordinating your effort to tell the community to come and vote with other leaders in the community? So I would like to hear your opinion.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. I'll take the second question first. Yes, from the beginning, the weekend before our launch, we invited as many community leaders here in Southeastern Michigan, among Arab and Muslim American communities specifically as possible, got them all in the same room, people who usually don't talk to each other, and went through and explained the strategy as I'm explaining it to you now. And so we are doing that work and invite you to join us, either you or people you love, go to listentomichigan.com, click the volunteer button. You can actually sit at home and automatically, it's a dialer, it automatically connects you, and there's a script on the screen. You can talk to people about, hey, I need you to vote uncommitted too. I would encourage you to do that. If we don't get as much votes as we can on Tuesday, I'm gonna come find you and say, why didn't you do enough? This is just as much as on me as it is on you and every single one of us. But here's also what I think on Tuesday. Our goal is not a specific number. Our goal is to ensure that our community understands that the pro-war forces in this country want us to believe that we have no power, that we shouldn't vote. We are mobilizing around a strategy that is encouraging people to vote, okay? That is number one. Number two, our goal is to make sure that ceasefire is part of the national conversation in a way that pressures Joe Biden to call for a ceasefire, to push for a ceasefire, so that the killing can stop. That is something that we have already achieved in terms of making sure that it's part of the national conversation. Now, how do we amplify that? How do we amplify the impact of that? If we can come out of Tuesday and, you name the strategy. One strategy that I've been sticking with is, Trump, the last time Trump won was in 2016. In 2016, Trump won by about 10,000 votes, 11,000 votes, okay? If we have at least that many uncommitted votes here in Michigan, people who are voting uncommitted to tell Joe Biden that they need a ceasefire, that's something that the White House will pay attention to, okay? So at least that much. I think we can get a lot more than that. I think the only way we get a lot more than that is if you join us in making sure that everybody you know and love votes uncommitted on Tuesday too.
One thing that hasn't been mentioned yet is that this strategy is not unprecedented. In 2008, when the Democratic National Committee left Barack Obama off of the Democratic primary ballot, Obama supporters were encouraged to vote uncommitted, and over 500,000 did, in a huge slap in the face to then presumptuous candidate nominee Hillary Clinton. And so that was actually the beginning of the end of the Clinton campaign. So this campaign has precedent in its power to shift the national conversation, even if it doesn't win the election on Tuesday.
Thank you so much. We have two quick questions. My first one is there anything being done to mobilize Republican Arab Americans in the state? There's a large population, right? And then his quick question.
Well, basically it's not a question, it's just more trying to get more understanding. Just help us to understand what is it uncommitted. What do you mean by uncommitted? We're trying to get more understanding so we can have more people get involved. Thank you.
If you could make it quick, who else wants to do this? But just make it quick, and we'd be happy to have additional conversation after this. And we have one last question.
I have one question.
From a good guy. What?
You're not tired when I go anywhere. Why you?
I'm not tired. I'm just worried about you.
We'd like to listen to these young people here more. Just keep going. Don't worry about it. Anybody wants to be that's good.
All right.
Thank you so much for both questions. One, yes, we are doing everything we can to reach as many voters in this state as possible, including Republican Arab Americans and others. What we are encouraging people to do is to pull the Democratic ballot because we have a Democratic president right now who we need to pressure, and that's why we're encouraging filling out the uncommitted box. And to your question about what is uncommitted, really uncommitted for us is just an option other than Joe Biden that is already on the ballot. So we don't have to, in other states, for example, people who want to register their disapproval of President Biden's support for genocide, they are getting people to write in ceasefire now or save Gaza now, right? But to teach a lot of people how to do that, that usually takes a lot more a lot more voter education. In our case, there's already something there, right? And if you write in free Gaza now, it won't do anything. That actually is not an option to you. It won't show up anywhere. But we've claimed the uncommitted box. We did a public campaign in the media saying everybody who votes uncommitted is for a ceasefire. And so now it's just telling as many people as possible that we did that work and that circling uncommitted is a vote against war. and in terms of like the fact that you voted uncommitted isn't reported on publicly anywhere. It's not like you know the Biden people can see who voted uncommitted and who voted for Biden. That is your private vote. Yeah, and the rest of the initiatives.
So basically, if we check the box, it means we're not voting for neither one. Right?
Exactly.
Is that what it is?
Yep. You're declaring yourself that like I'm not affiliating myself with any of the options at this moment.
Great, thank you.
But because of the media campaign, at the same time, we in the midst of information, we just before coming, the Jerusalem Post just did an article on Michigan uncommitted campaign. We have the Metro Times endorsing our campaign newspaper. So it's never really, we've never been to this level of organizing before. So again, what's really critical is for us to go out and vote.
I think that's a good option we have, because a lot of people, I'm involved in the community for years. A lot of people have doubts about neither candidates. People are afraid to go out and vote. They are registered to vote, they are capable to vote, but too afraid to go for the vote because it's uncertainty, because the uncertainty. I hope you understand what I'm coming from. So I think this is a good option, a great option for us to do. Thank you for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh.
Yeah, I think the last question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you give us?
It's okay.
Last question.
It's okay. No, I can ask my question after on. Why not both?
After.
Okay. I have two small questions. Actually.
One question.
First one is, do we have any statistic? What's the percentage of the Arab Muslim community who vote last election? And second question is about the uncommitted campaign. There is a lot of people who doesn't speak English here in the community, and they're not very active. Is there any kind of campaign targeted those people? And I would love to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Try to make the answers short.
I'll answer very briefly just on the second question. We do have flyers in Arabic that break it down, and I'd be happy to share with you. And also, for those who pulled the Democratic presidential primary ballot that is in Arabic, there's actually a box that says غير ملتزم, which doesn't mean that you don't pray 5 times a day. It means that.
That's a good one.
Thank you. I've been waiting to make that joke for so long.
Okay, Aoun.
I could answer the one on the statistics.
We have the privilege of
There is
Aoun.
one answer.
Petra, go.
On the statistics, so between 2016 and now, we closed the gap between what we call the Inshallah voters. We use that. So the Inshallah voters are those who are able to vote. They're legally able to vote, but they're not voting or they're not registered to vote. We closed that gap from 20% to now 0%. We don't have that gap anymore. That's in 5 years. So the next part of it is we just need to get people out. And we still have 15% of the community that says, I'm not gonna vote ever, no matter what you do. So forget about the 15% because you're just gonna be wasting your time. The rest, the only reason is them getting out.
Thank you. One question.
Can you give us an idea about your newly born organization, Arab American for Progress? Is it an APAC or what?
It's not an APAC. APACs are different legal registration. This is an organization that came about even before the October 7 events. And it came about because, and it's a C4 organization, C4 legally, you focus on policy and elections. We never had a C4 organizations before, never. And the C4 organizations in Washington, D.C., Arab Americans, are actually not a C4 organizations. So there was a real gap in terms of our ability to organize and be involved with electoral and policy issues. And there were limitations on C3 organizations in terms of how much we can do being involved in policy. So this gap, we talked before about building capacity. It's an effort to build our capacity, to empower our community when it comes to public policy issues and when it comes to elections and our impact in elections. So that's the purpose. It's been a gap for us on a state level for Arab Americans, and it's been also a gap, unfortunately, on a national level. So we're trying to plug, we're trying to work on overcoming this handicap for us as a community. And I think Lexi said something really important, that there are examples of communities, and I'll mention the Jewish and the Asian American communities in terms of empowerment, that they are, our aim is not to go after politicians. Our aim is to make them come to us and listen to us.
If you'll allow me just a moment, because I don't know if I'll get another opportunity to tell this part of the uncommitted campaign story. You know, when, I guess, I don't know if I'm still considered young people, but younger than Hassan at least. But when young people are organizing an initiative like this, we were in the middle of starting to launch the Listen to Michigan campaign, and we needed actually a C4 that could house this initiative. And we were going around thinking, oh my God, how are we going to run this campaign? And eventually happened upon the idea of, oh my God, Hassan has been working on this initiative that is just starting to launch, but we could use the capacity that's there. So I called Hassan frantically, telling him about this Listen to Michigan idea and trying to convince him to vote uncommitted while I was driving down the highway. He said, Best, I can't even hear you. Meet me at Al-Tayyib tomorrow morning. So I showed up at Al-Tayyib and explained the strategy to him, and he said, anything the organizers need, let's figure out how we can work together. And so I want you all to think and to understand that yes, young organizers are leading this campaign, are doing an incredible job. People like Lexi and so many people, like Layla Awad, our campaign manager, and others are doing incredible work. But we wouldn't have even been able to get off the ground if we didn't have the faith and the trust of Hassan Jabir specifically. I just needed to name that so that we as a community have that understanding, because he really came through for the
So, any other questions?
We need more of this, Hassan, especially before November.
We're gonna try to do this on a monthly basis. Okay? I wanna thank you all. You've been wonderful. You get a sense of community when you sit and listen to each other. So we thank you and we'll see you again.
رجعت مش عم تسألني؟ شو السؤال؟ لا اللي بدي أسأل
شكرا.
قلت لك يا أديب ربي داعي أديب ربي داعي بس سؤال لك أنت ولا كيف حالك؟ العضوان ولو حياة محمد ولا إجا شيء هي الرقم أنت مبيع رقمي هي رقمك تعال راح اسرق معك بلبنان وحكيت معك وقلت لي اسمك لا نشرب قلت لك يعني بلبنان وقلت لي بلبنان